What you up to, son?
I got something to tell you.
What do you gotta tell me?
I'm supposed to kill you.
Run that by me again.
I'm supposed to kill you.
Why would you do a thing like that?
The chief of my people is angry. They are all angry. They're angry because the English are taking all our land. They're also angry that the English want to teach all our children Christianity. And my people have their own religion. I converted by choice.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah, well, I converted. Doesn't mean everybody's going to convert to Christianity. So they're angry. And there was a little scuffle the other day, and one of our people died and wants to avenge his death.
So you're gonna kill me?
No, but tomorrow morning there's going to be a storm. I just want to make you aware. And be careful, because many people will die tomorrow, with the intent of pushing the English out of our country back to their home.
Tomorrow is going to be a war?
Tomorrow is going to be something. So, watch out.
I guess I should tell some people.
You should tell everybody. Tell everybody you can. Tomorrow is going to be something bad.
Well, let me grab the boat and let's get down to James City. Let everybody know. If this is true, we better tell everybody. God damn it, let's get the hell out of here and get everybody knowing. In the know. How much do you know about the English and the Indian Wars? The battles that went on between the natives. The natives in the area we now call the United States. You can't really say who was in the right. Although we have later histories where we have documentation of people getting screwed. The United States government screwed over a lot of Indian nations. But they're not the only ones who got screwed over by the government. Less government is better because they usually screw over everybody they can. That's just the way it works. They're still doing it to this day. And not everybody on earth is a saint, and especially 400 years ago. People were a little bit more wild than they are today. Although they have done some of the same things. Alright, so I'm going to give it a little backstory here, and then we're going to get into the massacre of 1622, what it's all about, who all the actors are, and how it all worked out. Okay, now there was a guy named Richard Pace that came to Virginia in the early years, assuming around the year 1611. He was a carpenter like myself. Pretty cool. Richard was employed by the Virginia Company of London to work possibly as an indentured servant, because there was a few of those types of families there in Virginia at the time we'll get into. Maybe in later videos, I don't know. But after his 7-year contract, he got 100 acres of land for his labor. This Richard Pace. And Richard Pace was married to Isabella Smith. They got married in London. And they came to Jamestown together. And both Richard and Isabella had 100 acres apiece in land, and 50 acres per each servant they had brought with them, or colonist, in which Richard brought 6 extra people with him, which amounted to 300 acres, plus his original 100, which equaled to about 400 acres he had total, in which he claimed. And Richard and Isabella had a son named George. So I don't know if George was counted and it was 6 people, as a 50 extra acres. But Pace also had a friend named William Perry with him. He may also have been counted as another 50 acres. I'm not sure. But they had a lot of land. As far as I know, Richard Pace only had one Indian youth living with him. And this Indian was a Powhatan Indian, and his name was Chanco. Chanco came to Richard and warned him about the Powhatan plan to attack the area where the settlers are, which is in Jamestown and the plantations in the area. So Richard Pace immediately took his boat down James River to notify the locals. Yeah, so Jamestown was saved because of Richard Pace spreading the news. But we really need to thank Chanco for telling Richard Pace, because Chanco was told by his people to kill Richard Pace. Because what they did is they all got together the next morning and nonchalant and just attacked people in their homes. And so Chanco was supposed to be part of that, but instead, people say because he was a Christian convert that he saved them. Maybe he's just a good person. Maybe it had nothing to do with religion. But the Powhatan were frequent visitors to Jamestown and the plantations. So when they showed up on March 22nd, 1622, they were having breakfast with the European settlers, coming to do regular jobs and doing the usual, until the moment came when they started to kill and butcher the colonists. There's actually a monument dedicated to Chanco. Here's a picture of it to remember him by. Treasure and appreciate the site of this, because you never know if rioters will try to come and destroy this part of American history as well. So shh, don't tell nobody. At least we have pictures. A quarter of the colonists were killed, and one source says that many women were captured. Possibly as many as 20 women were stolen. But there's another source that I've seen that said that near 100 people were stolen and taken as prisoners to the Indians, and all the men were killed and the women were not. So I don't know how true that is. But as far as we know, about 20 women were stolen. As I mentioned in my other videos, how conquerors always kill the men and take the women. Well, this happened here in America with the Powhatan taking the European women as prisoners, who were then held for ransom. A woman named Jane Dickinson was one of the women among several that a guy named Dr. Pot paid the Indians for the woman's return. Yeah. And so Jane Dickinson, her husband died in the massacre. And of his dead body, owing Dr. Pot 3 years of servitude on his contract still, Dr. Pot's like, well, your husband's dead, so you owe me. So he made Jane Dickinson work for him. And she was distraught. She's like, this sucks, man. She said, when she was stolen by the Indians, she worked as hard for the Indians as Mr. Pot had her work. So she's like, you know what? If he would have left me there, it would have been the same thing, because he'd treat me like garbage. She said working for him was terrible, just as terrible as working for the Indians, she said. So she wasn't grateful. I guess some people are jag-off bosses, you know, because there's other indentured servants that were taken care of. We'll get into that in different videos. Well, I can mention a little bit of it. There's a woman named Lady Temperance Flowerdew, and she was married to George Yeardley. and he named his plantation after her, which was called the Flowerdew 100. And they had about 30 people on their plantation, in which, if I'm not mistaken, about 15 of those people were the original black slaves from Jamestown, from that 1619 first slave boat. So I think it was 20 slaves, 20-something slaves that came to Jamestown, African slaves. And of those 20-something, 15 of them, if I'm not mistaken, the number, I think it was 15, was on the Flowerdew 100. Now, when the 1622 attack came, they killed only 6 people. It is said that of these slaves, well, they were actually indentured servants at that time. They were servants at the Flowerdew plantation. I've read that they were treated pretty well. Those 15 of the 20 slaves or indentured servants that came on the, I keep saying slaves because of all the narrative that's going around, making it sound like, what they wanted to sound like, but they were indentured servants, which we'll get into in other videos. Yeah, so their plantation got, they survived it. But of the women that were taken captives, at first, seven of the women were released from the Indians, and the Jane Dickinson was the one woman. By the year 1924, about 7 women, including Jane Dickinson, were retrieved from the natives out of the possible 15 to 20 that were stolen. By 1630, Anne Jackson was released. Mistress Boys was one of the captives. Then Mistress Jeffries was another captive that was released, and but she died within a few months of her freedom from the Indians. And then there was a woman named Anne Jackson, who was also in bad shape due to her captivity from the Indians. And the colonists ordered her to go back to England for health reasons. So I don't know anything much more about her. But now, not all women were taken as prisoners. Like I said, Flowerdew wasn't. There's another plantation where Thomas Pierce and his wife were killed at the Thomas Pierce house over against Mulberry Island. Thomas Breadwood and his wife were killed at the Edward Bennett's plantation. Among others at the plantation, men and women, Alice Jones, a maid named Parnell, Henry Price, George Cole, Robert Gray, and just to name a few. But there's men and women that got killed, but they ended up taking some women prisoners for whatever reason. Well, you might know the reason. There were hundreds of people killed, men and women and children. Hey, excuse me, I think that guy over there identifies as a woman. So let him free. Can you imagine? The Indians take like 20 women, then they get back to their campsite, and then the one Indian's like, "Hey chief, these 20 women we stole, I just looked up their address. They're not women." "We identify as women." "No, you don't. You got disgraced." Many more would have died, though, if it wasn't for good old Chanco. He saved the colonists in America, I guess, at that time. Then there was a man named Samuel Jordan who served as a burgesses in the House of Burgesses. He had a plantation called Jordan's Journey, in which is sometimes referred to as Beggar's Bush. A lot of settlers took refuge at this man's place for safety against the Powhatan. This is one of the few places that kept the settlers safe from the attack. And Samuel died in 623. His daughters inherited the land, and his wife went off and married some other dude William Farrar, or maybe his name is pronounced Farrar, William Farrar. Which one of this William Farrar, is one of his descendants is a historian on YouTube, which is pretty fucking interesting. But yeah, a lot of people took refuge at this dude's house because he fortified his walls. He says, stay out. And then later, after the attack, a lot of people started building walls up around their plantation. So I guess you could thank Chanco, Pace, and then people that build fortifications or walls around their property for saving the colonists. But sure enough, on March 22nd, 1622, the Indians, the Powhatan, came to Jamestown in the early morning because everybody was hanging out back then. There was rules about like how many natives were allowed in there, and like I said, there was an Indian child living with Richard, and so they knew about where everybody lived. They knew how the town was going, how everything worked. And so they came there in the morning, and they were hanging out in different households. And some people, I don't think they came with weapons, but the Indians came and they had breakfast with some of the people, and they were sitting down. They brought some hens with them. There's a lot of notes on it. There's a lot of writings on it. I'm going to go over a lot of the memoirs and notes on it from various different people that lived at that time. And because what happened is, well, you know what happened. The Indian Massacre of 1622. So here's, I'm looking at a document here by Joseph Mead, M-E-A-D, London, July 12th. I had almost forgot that all our people in Virginia, in all places, should on March 22nd at 8 in the morning, under pretense of friendship, have been murdered by the natives, and had not an Indian boy the night before discovered it to his master, who all night sent about to give notice, yet in Martin's 100, too far of to have notice, almost all were slain, as namely 329. Unquote. So I think there was 329 people, he was saying. But I think I read different numbers before. But anyway, so that's Joseph Mead. Take on the Indian Massacre. You know, it's been some time, but I almost positive I found some diary of some woman that lived at the time, and she wrote in her book, because after the massacre, a lot of the people ran. I think they were into a barn or over far away, and they had to get away from what was going on in the town. And so she wrote about it, how all the people were killed. And then, like I mentioned in my other videos, that people had to rely on the Indians after that because it destroyed everything. And so then these people were stuck there in these places that they were building up, and the Indians destroyed it. And now they're like, well, I guess now those people that would destroyed us, now we have to rely on them for supplies. But I cannot find where I had that document. But anyway, so let's go over more of this memoirs and letters and so on and so forth that I have here. So in the August 1622, the London Company had made up a pamphlet. It was called a Declaration of the State of the Colony and Affairs in Virginia. And then it says, with the relation of the barbarous massacre in the time of peace and league, treacherously executed by the native infidels upon the English, the 22nd of March last. And some part of the pamphlet read this: our hands, which before were tied with gentleness and fair usage, are now set at liberty by the treacherous violence of the savages, so that we, who with Thurto had possession of no more ground than their waste, and our purchase, may now, by right of war and law of nations, invade the country and destroy them who sought to destroy us. Now, their cleared grounds in all their villages, which are situated in the fruitfulest places of the land, shall be inhabited by us. So as you can see, I said they were living peaceful with each other for a time, and even in the Burgesses. If I'll do a separate video on the laws of the House of Burgesses, what they were talking about in the different charters, where they're saying have peace with the natives. But yeah, I'll go over some of the laws right now of the House of Burgesses. This will fit well in regards to the Indian boy living with Pace. But here, listen. One of the first things it mentions in the House of Burgesses, the first laws, it says, "By this present General Assembly be it enacted that no injury or oppression be wrought by the English against the Indians, whereby the present peace might be distributed, and ancient quarrels might be revived. And farther be it ordained that the Chickahominy are not to be exempted out of this law, until either that such order come out of England, or that they do provoke us by some new injury." So you can see here that they're saying, hey, don't screw with the Indians, and if they do something to you, well, we're going to do something back to them. So they say that here in the House of Burgesses, 1619. Another law says that no man do sell or give any Indians any piece, shot, or powder, or any other arms, offensive or defensive, upon pain or being held a traitor to the colony, and of being hanged as soon as the fact is proved, without all redemption. So if you give a gun to an Indian, you're going to get hanged. You're going to get killed. They're going to hang you in front of everybody. Be like, see what you did? Oh, there was another part too. Let me look for it in the House of Burgesses. I translated all this stuff, but I want to read it word for word. I actually have notes on it that I translated it, put in regular English. But I'm just going to read it right from the Burgesses because you want it. I'm going to do a whole video on the early laws in America. But maybe 1619 and prior, because 1619 was when the House of Burgesses was, and before that was just charters, right? So I'll just do one video on that. Okay, back to the what I was saying about the massacre. It took a little bit of a turn now since this massacre, but it wasn't very peaceful. There was a lot of little scuffles that weren't massacres, that didn't make big time news at the time. So it wasn't very peaceful. It wasn't just a bunch of peaceful English people hanging out with a bunch of peaceful Indians, and all of a sudden a massacre happened. Of course, there was little scuffles here and there, people getting killed, so on and so forth. But as far as peace goes, before that, there's a lot of memoirs and journal logs and stuff like that where there's been people that got killed in various places, by rivers and stuff like that, just randomly. And there's random accounts of this kind of stuff, and it's and they write about it so nonchalant because back in those days they spoke very differently. It's different times. It's hard to see it in modern eyes. How they seen things and how they talked about things. But some people are very descriptive, but whatever. So there was a little bit of a dark energy between them from the get-go, as you could see from my earlier videos. But this one kind of really kicked off the really bad stuff, it sounds like. But they were giving people 100 acres of land, and that was Indian land at the time. And can you imagine each person getting 100 acres of land? A guy and his wife got 200 acres, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video. So there's got to be some pissed off Indians, really. And then they wanted to make a school. They wanted to make a school to teach the Indians how to be, Europeans and Christians and so on and so forth. And the natives didn't like that. In the year 1620, this guy named George Thorp was supposed to be in charge of getting a university built and taking care of to teach the Indians, I guess, westernize them or teach them Christianity and all the good things in life. But that didn't happen because the massacre stopped them. So that would have been the first university in America. But the Indian Massacre stopped it. I'll do a separate video on it. But a lot of you didn't know that there was going to be a university in the early 1600s. You just thought it was just a bunch of wild Englishmen sitting around smoking pipes. Yeah, well, they had school in mind. They had universities in mind. They weren't just sitting around drinking beer and playing golf all day, talking about football. But we'll get into that in different videos. We'll get more elaborate into other videos. I don't want to get too much into this one. I want to nail down on this one topic. Now, the treasurer in Virginia, George Sandys, wrote a letter to England about the attack and its consequences. Sandy's letter said, in the colony had advertised how those treacherous natives, after 5 years of peace, by a general combination in one day plotted to subvert their whole colony, and at one instant of time, through our several plantations, were 140 miles up one river on both sides. The slaughter had been universal, if God had not put it into the heart of the Indian belonging to one Perry to disclose it, who living in the house of one Pace, he's referring to Richard Pace here, was urged by another Indian, his brother, who came the night before and lay with him, to kill Pace, so commanded by their king, as he declared, as he would kill Perry, telling further that by such an hour in the morning a number would come from the divers places to finish the execution, who failed not at the time. Perry's Indian rose out of his bed and reveals it to Pace, that used him as a son, and thus the rest of the colony had warning given them by this means was saved. Such was, God be thanked for it, the good fruit of an infidel converted to Christianity. For though 300 and more of ours died by many of these pagan infidels, yet thousands of ours were saved by the means of one of them alone, which was made a Christian. Blessed be God forever, whose mercy endureth for Pace upon this discovery, securing his house before they rode out river of James City, in the place near 3 miles in breadth, and gave notice therefore thereof to the governor, by which means they were prevented there, and at such other plantations as was possible for timely intelligence to be given. For where they saw us standing upon our guard, at the sight of peace, they all ran away. In other places that could have no notice, some pieces with munition, the use whereof they know not, were there. Now you see in this letter here, he said thousands of people were saved, but there was only over 1,000 people there on the in the area at the time. James City, in the plantations. So they said 347 people had died from that massacre. There was a guy named William Stith that compiled a book together that it was called History of the First Discovery of the Settlements of Virginia, published in 1740. And I guess he had some material records from the Virginia Company. And he said that the kid's name was Chanco. So Chanco was the converted Christian Indian that warned Pace about the Indian uprising. Now, of course, there's John Smith that wrote about it, but a lot of people don't like John Smith. So, but he's got some details about it, some really interesting, detailed descriptions of the massacre. And he wrote something called "The Massacre upon the 2 and 20th of March," if you all want to look it up. He begins to describe an Indian named Namatanao, which was part of the Powhatan. And so this Namatanao is killed, and that kind of angers Opechekinoff, the chief Indian. Okay, so here, which leads to the massacre, supposedly. That might be one thing, and like I said, the school might be another thing. So it's not just a thing that just happened out of nowhere. Okay, so here goes. Let me read Smith's writings here about what he says about Namatanao. The prologue to this tragedy is supposed was occasioned by Namatanao, otherwise called Jack of the Feather, because he commonly was strangely adorned with them. I guess he had a lot of feathers all over him or something like that. And for his courage and policy was accounted amongst the savages their chief captain, and immortal from any hurt could be done with him by the English. This captain coming to one Morgan house, I guess somebody named Morgan, the house of Morgan, knowing he had many commodities that he desired, persuaded Morgan to go with him to Pamunkey, the chief town of the Pamunkey Indians, to truck, but the savage murdered him by the way, and after 2 or 3 days returned again to Morgan's house, where he found 2 youths, his servants, who asked for their master, and Jack replied directly that he was dead, and the boy suspected as it was by seeing him wear his hat. So I guess the Indian killed him and put his hat on. Would have him to master George Thorp, but Jack so mourned their patience they shot him, so he fell to the ground. Put him in a boat to have him before the governor, then 7 or 8 miles from them. But by the way, Jack, finding the pangs of death upon him, desired of the boys 2 things. The one was that they would not make it known he was slain with a bullet. The other, to bury him amongst the English. At the loss of this savage, Opechekinoff, much grieved and repined, and great threats of revenge. But the English returned him such terrible answers, that he cunningly dissembled his intent, with the greatest signs he could of love and peace, yet within 14 days after he acted what followeth. So far what we see here is that supposedly, allegedly, from what John Smith says, is that the Indian came to his house, and then he went for a ride somewhere, and then he killed him, and then he came back to the dude's house to take his stuff, and 2 young people were there, and they asked him where he was, and he said he's dead. So they shot the Indian, killed him. But everybody's like, hey, you're going to get all the other Indians mad, so hide this guy, bury him on our soil. So that's what was going on there in this crazy English, Old English letter. So even if this isn't true, the story is true, or half true at least, it is still pretty interesting that this Namatanao, Jack they call him, it's interesting that this Jack hung out with Morgan, and then they went to the Pamunkey village or town. So they were hanging out at different Indian tribes and different towns and stuff like that. It's very interesting that they were like, he's like, hey, go take a walk with me or whatever. And he's like, okay. So there was that kind of peace at that time. And then however Morgan got killed that day, whether it was either by Jack or by something else, is a different story. But it just goes to show you what people, how they were to each other back then at that time, that they were hanging out. And this Namatanao came to Morgan's house, So it's just like, it doesn't seem as segregated as I would have considered without hearing this story first. So the Indian named Jack came to Morgan. They took a walk together, and then Jack came back with Morgan dead, and that's when the fit hit the fan, as far as that part goes. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but I'm sure it's half true, because why would the guy take him off somewhere and then kill him, and then come and take his stuff from his house? I mean, that doesn't make sense. But that's the story we have. And then he was killed. Then they killed the Indian. So it says, Sir Francis Wyatt, at his arrival, was advertised. He found the country settled in such a firm peace, as most men there thought sure and unviable, maybe, I don't know. Not only in regard of their promises, but of necessity, the poor weak savages being very way bettered by us, and safely sheltered and defended, whereby we might freely follow our business. And such was the conceit of this conceited peace, as that there was seldom or never a word, and seldomer a piece, except for deer or fowl, by which assurance the most plantations were placed strangely and scatteredly, as a choice vein of rich ground endured them, and further from the neighbors the better. Their houses generally open to the savages, who were always friendly, fed at their tables, and lodged in their bedchambers, which made the way plain to effect their intents, and the conversion of the savages as they supposed. I don't know if I should read all this. There's a lot to it. But what he's saying is that, let me pick out some parts here, that he says that they borrowed them boats, and they let them stay in their houses, and they ate with them, and they were all friends. But things happen. Having occasion to send Openchakeenough about the middle of March, he visited the messenger well, and told him to held the peace so firm, the sky should fall, or dissoluted it. Yet such was the treachery of those people, when they had contrived our destruction, even but 2 days before the massacre, they guided our men with much kindness. That says through the woods. This English language, or the Old English language here. And one Brown, this guy named Brown, that lived among the Indians to learn their language, they sent home to his master. Yeah, they borrowed our boats to transport themselves over the river, to consult on the devilish murder that ensued, and of the utter extirpation which God of his mercy, by the means of one of themselves converted to Christianity, prevented. And as well on the Friday morning that fatal day, being the 22nd of March, as also in the evening before, as at other times, they came unarmed into our houses, with deer, with turkey, with fish, fruits, and other provisions to sell us. Yeah, in some places sat down at breakfast with our people, whom immediately with their own tools they flew most barbarously, not sparing either age or sex, man or child, so sudden in their execution that few or none discerned the weapon or blow that brought them to destruction. In which manner also they slew many of our people at several works in the fields, well knowing in what places and quarters each of our men were, in regard of their familiarity with us for the effecting the great masterpiece of work, their conversion, and by the means fell that fatal morning under the bloody and barbarous hands, the perfidious and inhumane people. 347 men, women and children, most by their own weapons, and not being content with their lives, they fell again upon the dead bodies, making as well as they could a fresh murder, defacing, dragging, and mangling their dead carcasses into many pieces, and carrying some parts of their dead bodies away in derision, with base and brutish triumph. Neither yet did these beasts spare those among the rest well known unto them, for whom they had daily received many benefits, but spitefully also massacred them without any remorse or pity, being it more fell than lions and dragons, and histories record, which have preserved their benefactors, such in the force of good deeds, though done to cruel beasts, to take humanity upon them. But these miscreants put on a more unnatural brutishness than beast, as by those instances may appear. So if you want to look it up, I told you all the names of all the different people, all the different sources I have, so you could find and look it up if you want yourself. If you want, because I can't read all of it. There's like so much to it, but it's so damn interesting that just so many reasons for the possibility of or the excuses for the massacre happening. And now we have the details of what happened. Basically, they came in. I guess the Indians were there daily, and like I said, that one Indian lived with some of the people, and so they came and had breakfast, and they just started killing people. And the Indians didn't have their own tools; they used the tools of the people. If I'm reading that right from Smith's works, writings there. And then they killed the people, and then they even cut their limbs, their head off, and their arms off, and stuff like that, and took some of their body parts away, and stuff like that. So it was pretty goddamn crazy, but things were a lot different back then, because that was kind of happening all over the world. It was kind of a common thing back then to cut off people's heads. I don't think I've ever seen a person's head cut off in my whole life, in the year 2023 at least. But I'm sure 100 years ago or 200 years ago, it was pretty common. I bet you a couple hundred years ago, everybody in the world probably had seen it once or twice in their lifetime, where I have never seen it once. So things were a little bit different back then. If something like that would have happened today, I'm sure people would have boarded up their windows back then in Jamestown, if it had happened today, and they would have wrote on their boards, on their plywood over their windows, Indian lives matter. Don't break down my house. And they'll put signs in front of their yards and stuff like that, so the Indians don't screw with them. But they didn't, because it was a different time, it was a different place, and they cut off heads back then. Now they just torture cars. But as you can see, everybody came together. That was included in the massacre. There was the whole tribe was there, but then there was the people that were on the Englishmen's side that warned them about it. So not everybody's an asshole, no matter your race or your ethnicity or your tribe. There's always somebody that uses some logic, or a different logic, I guess. Now, Smith also writes about a guy named gentleman named M. George Thorp, deputy to the college lands. I guess now he's going to describe some of the people that were killed in the massacre. And he said that this George Thorp was really cool to the Indians. And then he describes at one time that when the Indians were in the neighborhood, and there was dogs that were barking at them, and they were afraid of the dogs, I guess George Thorp would have the dogs killed, and he would tell the owners that if you don't train your other dogs not to get crazy around the natives here, then we're going to kill your dogs. I guess how he referred to Thorp and the Indians. He thought nothing too dear for them. He never denied them anything, insomuch that when they complained about our mastiffs, okay, here's that line. So yeah, and they killed this guy. And now here's another guy, Captain Nathaniel Powell, one of the first planters, a valiant soldier, and not any in the country better known amongst them. Yet such was the error of over-conceited power and prosperity, and their simplicities. The Indians, not only slew him and his family, but butcher-like hangled their bodies, and cut off his head, to express their uttermost height of cruelty. So wow, they were really butchering these people, like I said. And he also talks about one guy that got away, that fought the Indians, and the Indians ran away, and then this guy got away. This is crazy. What a crazy story. Happened in 1622. Nathaniel Caussey, Causie, Caussey, being cruelly wounded, and the savages about him, with an axe did cleave one of their heads. So I guess the Indians came into his house and he hit one of them in the head with an axe, whereby the rest of them fled, and he escaped. For they hurt not any that did either fight or stand upon their guard. Then I guess there was two men that ran inside of one house, and they were fighting 60 or more people off, 60 Indians that were around them. Of the house, I guess, shooting arrows and yelling at them, and they're like, "Get away!" Then there were some other people. M. Baldwin at Oraskayak with his wife, being so wounded she lay for dead. Yet by his discharging of his piece, he saved her, his house, himself, and divers others. So I guess this dude was super cool. And his wife was on the floor dying, and then the Indians went to go kill her, and the guy was like, "Hey man, I'm your friend." And they let him go. Okay, that sounds strange in the massacre, but I guess that's what's written here. And then they came to somebody named Master Harrison's house, near half a mile from Baldwin's, where the Master Thomas Hamer, with 6 men and 18 or 19 women and children. Here the savages, with many presents and fair persuasions, fain they came from Captain Ralph Hamer to go to their king. Then hunted in the woods. Presently they sent to him, but not coming as they expected, set fire of a tobacco house. And then came to tell them in the dwelling house of it to quench it. All the men ran towards it, but Master Hamer, not suspecting anything, whom the savages pursued, shot them full of arrows, then beat out their brains. Hamer, having finished a letter he was writing, followed after to see what was the matter, but quickly they shot an arrow into his back, which caused him to return and barricade up the doors, whereupon the savages set fire on the house. Harrison's boy, finding his master's piece loaded, discharged it at random, at which bear report the savages all fled. Baldwin still discharged his piece, and Hamer, with 22 persons, thereby got to his house, leaving their own burning. In like manner, they had fired Lieutenant Basie's house, with all the rest thereabout, slain the people, and so left the plantation. So they were burning down houses, they were killing people. People were fighting back. What a crazy time in 1622. So yeah, I just wanted to cover that little section of history in the year 1622. And I don't know if I should cover more of it. Oh, there's actually some written stuff on Wikipedia here. And it says here, they took 400 colonists, a third of the white population. Who the hell put that there? The third of the white population. And took 20 captive women. The captives lived and worked as Powhatan Indians until they died or were ransomed. Yeah, so there's more to it. And as it says here, like I mentioned before, the colonists used the 1622 massacre as a justification for seizing Powhatan land for the next 10 years. So just like in present day, in modern times, people are trying to push ideologies onto other people and culture and stuff like that. So anytime anybody wants to overtake somebody else with culture or ideologies, there's going to be bloodshed and burning. It happened throughout history with Stalin. It's happened with the Muslims. It happened with Rome. Genghis Khan did it. He came in, he raped the women, burned the houses, put his ideology on people. The Crusades did it. after they were trying to win back Muslim lands because the Muslims did it to them, and now they're doing it to them, and so back and forth, and we just have it in modern times now. So we're just as civil as we were back then. We're just doing it in a little bit different light, a little bit different way. So can you really say that the Powhatan were justified by doing the massacre, by killing all the people? Because it was kind of like the George Floyd thing, right? So they're going to come in and just like destroy everything and kill people and burn things down, destroy business, stuff like that. So, well, it was justified, wasn't it? So if the guy was killed, the Indian guy was killed, so like, we're going to come and screw up your place. And then you have on the other side of the table, you have people saying, well, no, they weren't justified. The English are justified for taking the land of the other people because they should be learning Jesus and so on and so forth. So who is right and who is wrong? So I guess there's both people think they're right. Or they're both wrong. It's just a human thing. Like I talked about in an earlier episode, how humans are all animals. You're all animals. That's it for this episode. Adios.